Hi everybody. Today we've got a really interesting session with health and safety consultant Dave Price, and he's been behind much of the knowledge within our health and safety expert software, the documentation that the software produces. So I'm really pleased to introduce Dave. So welcome and thanks for joining me today from my home to yours. We're obviously remote today, recording this for the people listening. So thanks for joining me, Dave.
Hi Joe, thanks for the invite.
I know you've got tons to say on the subject of health and safety generally, but today we're obviously talking about COVID-19 and its impact on site safety. It's obviously a very specific topic, so we've got quite a lot of detail to cover today. But between us, with the software and your knowledge, and I should add also that Dave's got all the letters after his name from his health and safety background as a trainer, and also I should add previously as a police enforcement officer. So we're obviously in safe hands today, Dave. I think we could probably say that we've prevented a few accidents with health and safety expert, and also maybe saved a few lives with the software and the content. And obviously with this in mind, we're really hoping that with the COVID-19 situation that people listening, the builders listening today, feel that they can go back with some practical measures in mind of how to do that safely. And I think with all the mention by the Prime Minister of being a COVID-19 secure business, I think from the perspective of the homeowner, letting somebody into their home is really important that you get this right, so that the homeowner or the client has got confidence in what you're doing. And that's besides the fact that obviously it's the law that you're compliant. You have to get it right anyway. Besides the kind of the financial, the commercial aspects, it's the law that you get this right. So we'll be talking about that. So today's session is Power Hour, COVID-19 Safety on Site. We'll be touching on a lot of things that will help you get back to site safely. Dave's going to run us through some of those in a minute. And also I'm going to shamelessly plug at various points the health and safety expert software that can help you get your COVID-19 policies and measures right in the form of risk assessments and policies, site rules, and so on. So again, we'll talk about that more in a minute. So I'll finish my monologue, Dave. I think the pressing question for builders listening, and many of them will have probably started back to work already, but if I'm talking on behalf of the builder here, I'm asking the question for them, can they safely go back to work now? Can they go back to work? I guess safely is a different question. So I'll rephrase. Can they go back to work?
Okay, well, let's go. There's a short answer, and as you might well imagine, and there's a long answer. So the short answer is yes, because we know that that's been approved, that building contractors are able to go back to work. The long answer is that in order to do that, there's going to be quite a big fulfillment on what they have to do to be compliant with the guidance.
Okay.
So there's a couple of things to think about, and obviously what I'm interested in is the second answer, the long answer, and hopefully over the next half an hour or so we'll cover some of the things that we must think about before we can put that into effect.
Yeah. So I guess the law is saying that the building firm has got to do as much as is practicably possible to get things safely back on track.
Yeah, that's it. So we have to go back to the sections of the Health and Safety at Work Act. Without being too technical about it, this act is still relevant, and it still governs what employees and employers must do at work, more particularly for today's purposes, employers. And you touched on it. An employer must do what is reasonably practicable to ensure the health and safety of his or her workforce. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of broad brush picture. And then the little bit there, the crucial elements there would be reasonably practicable. That is fleshed out by the guidance that various bodies give. And in this case, it's given in respect of COVID-19 to be compliant with that area of the Act. So it does have legal backing. So as well as wanting to get it right for, altruistic reasons, contractors need to get it right, because if they don't, they will be breaking the law.
So there's a legal obligation of all firms, no matter whether you're a builder or a hairdresser or whatever. There's some obligations for firms under the Health and Safety at Work Act. That's right, is it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The Health and Safety at Work Act covers all workplaces.
Okay.
From retail through to service industries, and obviously, as far as we're concerned, the building trades.
Okay, so this section 2, again, it sounds very technical, doesn't it? What is that all about? Is that about managing the risk in the workplace then?
Well, that's the crucial element to it. We're all interested in how we manage this new risk that we have. The hazard is the COVID-19.
Yeah.
So we have a new hazard in the workplace, potentially. And we have to demonstrate as employees, as firms, that we are taking steps to manage that risk.
Okay.
And the normal way to do that, Joe, would be in the form of carrying out, undertaking a risk assessment.
Right.
Which is, again, a legal requirement for all companies, all firms, to carry out risk assessment in the workplace. And
Okay.
then the law goes on to say, if the company employs 5 or more people, then that risk assessment has to be written down.
Right. Okay. So I get a quick summary then of what we've said so far. So COVID-19 has been dealt with as just another risk on site, just like for, working at heights or working in excavations and so on. Yeah. So just like you do a risk assessment for those kind of activities, we need to be thinking about COVID-19 as one of those kind of risky activities. But I guess it's quite a big and broad topic, isn't it? Because COVID-19 impacts literally everything that firm does. So there's lots to be thinking about.
Sure.
So just picking up on your point there, you said 5 employees or more, 5 employees or over. So if I've got less than that, I'm a small contractor and I've got 1 to 4 employees, does that mean that I don't have to do anything, that I'm off the hook then? Do I?
Not at all, no.
Right, okay.
For a couple of reasons, really. One is that the requirement for the 5 or more is a bare legal minimum.
Right.
The practicalities in commercial terms are that if you as a contractor who employs between 1 and 4 people inclusively, and you attempt to get on tender lists with principal designers and clients, and you use that as a kind of implement to say, well, I don't actually need to put this into writing because I don't fulfill the 5 or more. The reality of that is that you probably find it extremely difficult, probably impossible, to get on a tender list. So, my advice is, irrespective of that bare minimum legal requirement of 5 or more, whatever the size of your company, get on and do the risk assessment and get it into writing, because unless you do that, you ain't going to get any work.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there is the Prime Minister's kind of COVID-19 or COVID secure notice that he's been talking about a lot recently on the news, in terms of even if you're a shop, and that if you can prove that you are kind of COVID secure, that you have gone through this process of following the guidance and having conducted the risk assessment, then you may reopen. I guess this is just the same for the building firm. I think homeowners are going to be very aware of the COVID secure notice or the COVID secure message, so are going to be asking for it. I would think. I mean, I know there's going to be the odd rogue client who is more focused on getting a project finished on time and within budget, and that's a whole different subject. But most homeowners, most clients are aware of the kind of this, I guess, the seriousness of the situation, and it requiring mitigation measures in place for COVID-19. So because rewinding a mo, so I'm eating my words there, we were saying that COVID-19 obviously touches so many aspects of the business. It's all right if you're saying, I'm going to focus just on the risks involved with working in that excavation or up on that roof working at heights, but COVID-19 touches every aspect of the business and how they do things. So it's a very big risk assessment really to be doing on. There's a lot to be thinking about. So I think if you were thinking I'm going to do it all in my head and I'm not going to write it down, that's a tough ask, really, isn't it?
It's impossible, apart from the commercial aspect and the legal requirement to do it. How could you go about tackling this subject
Yes.
inside your head without getting stuff written down?
Yeah.
So I urge all contractors to get the risk assessment undertaken, to get it up together.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that within your software, Joe, there is such a document.
There is indeed. Shameless plug. Yeah, we've got within Health and Safety Expert a COVID-19 risk assessment for work on site, and we've also got one for the office, for the office workplace, because slightly bigger firms have probably got both, obviously, sites going or projects within homes, and yeah, they might have an office, albeit a small one, or but again, you need to get that right. So you've got multiple workplaces. Unfortunately, the builder, he's got, so again, a lot to take on. So I wanted to just touch on the specific obligations for the builder. So I totally get all firms need this general kind of workplace risk assessment, but linking to what I was just saying, the builder's got lots of different workplaces. He's got lots of different sites, and he may well have his office. So tell me about that. How does he deal with the risk assessment for that? Is he allowed one generic one that covers everything, or what?
Absolutely not. No.
Right.
The whole essence of the risk assessment is that it is project and site specific. So if
right.
you're talking about a particular project on a particular site, the risk assessment has to be carried out, and even the site location named within that written risk assessment.
Right, so the site address has got to be on there as well.
Yes, it certainly has. And again, if that building company works from or owns, as I'm sure most of them do, offices, then there must be carried out in respect of that office venue location a separate office risk assessment. And again, I know that such a document lurks within your software also.
And it does, it is, yeah. There is the COVID-19 office-based risk assessment, and that's got a whole different set of risks to that of the site.
Because they're different, they have different characteristics. The site is the site, and the office is the office, and we don't have to be too bright to picture the difference between the two. So there can't be any generic hookup. They must be two individual documents produced in respect of.
So I think that's probably going to be quite disappointing then for people listening, that they think they can just have a risk assessment on file. I've done that. I've got it in the drawer. I'm all right. That's not the case. It's got to be project specific, site specific.
A drawer is not a good place to be. A drawer or a cupboard, I shudder when people reach in
with a big binder
and knock the dust off documents and say, I've got my risk assessment here.
Yeah.
This is a working document. It's a live document. It needs to be reviewed. It's a way forward to carry out the work. So please, get it out of the cupboard or the drawer as soon as you can, and let people see it. Make it part of your construction phase plan.
Right. So they've got the risk assessment to hand. So you're saying, so what do they do with it? Who sees it? Where does it go?
Lots of people will need to see it, but essentially, crucially, the persons carrying out the work will need to have a look at that. Mm-hmm. Because if they don't, they'll have no idea how to be safely carrying out the work.
Yeah.
So, get that document out and get people looking at it who are doing the work.
Okay. All right. Is that a dog I hear in the background, Dave?
That's my hound, yes.
Your hound?
Somebody's probably jogging by my window.
Your security hound. Right. So I guess we're saying then that all the team need to see it. So you need to get that acknowledged that they have seen it. They understand the risks. They understand required of them on site. So with Health and Safety Expert, we've got an acknowledgement of the risk assessment, so that you can write down who's seen it, when they saw it, and that they acknowledge that they did read it. Probably don't share a pen right now or get that close, but write it down on the
maybe do what the delivery people do, take a photograph of the thing in situ, and then there's no contact. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very ingenious, aren't they, in dreaming up ways of having non-contact operations being carried out.
Yeah, well, you said to me before, actually, Dave, that you've got a lot of respect for the construction industry, because they are obviously a very inventive, kind of creative group of people. There are ways around lots of the challenges that kind of COVID-19 presents. Obviously, being safe as they put together these solutions, but yeah, we need to tap into that from the construction.
Absolutely, yes. It's a very creative industry, isn't it? The very nature of the fact that people are making things and building things and designing things, and I'm sure that our industry will produce a lot of innovation as they get back to work, and we'll benefit in the final analysis from that.
Yes, well, I guess it's going to change how things are done long term. I think obviously it's happened. The rate of change has been very, very quick. And I think the expectation of clients, and as you said before, principal designers, principal contractors, if you're a smaller contractor working for bigger contractors, their requirements are going to have changed already. We're in it for the long term, I guess. We're not going to go backwards. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed it, Dave, but when I watch the TV, of an evening, if I grab 5 minutes respite from my children and hounds as well, I've got dogs, you can see in my picture up behind. I'm watching TV and I'm thinking, those people are a bit too close. What are they doing? They're sharing a phone, and so mindset has already changed a little bit. So I think but any builders listening need to be thinking that from a homeowner perspective, there is that awful expression, but the new normal. So don't think you can wing it for a bit.
Yeah, and people are very quick to point out other people's shortcomings, aren't they?
Yes, it does appear so, especially on social media right now.
But just imagine where you have contractors who are on full display at the side of quite a busy main road, and people are actually passing by and observing things that are not right.
Yes.
There's an HSE hotline where people can ring anonymously and things that they feel are not being done correctly.
Yeah, I heard that actually. There's a big investment in that, isn't there?
And I'm pretty certain that the HSE have made a recruitment of new staff in the light of this virus to make sure that workplaces are being conducted properly.
Yeah.
So, heavens above, if you are in the contracting and building business, the last thing you want is somebody observing what they consider to be some incorrect procedure on your operation and ringing the HSE about you and reporting.
Yes.
That people do that.
They do, yeah. I mean, it's funny that you say that, because I noticed on the weekend, for my sins, I was on Facebook. I'm sure everybody else, knows Facebook too. But somebody on the street had a bonfire in the morning, and everybody yesterday on the street, and I don't know why, because everyone's minding their own business. Oh my gosh, somebody's having a bonfire. Do they not know that it shouldn't be happening in the day, because people have got COVID-19 breathing difficulties, and everybody was on it. And if that was a building firm doing something that people was thinking was untoward, or not obeying the guidance, I think they would be saying, "Did you see that firm doing X or Y?" And all of a sudden,
yes, and also a competitor in the industry who's doing it right, who's doing the proper thing, and is doing all the things that we're talking about, then observes, as I said, it may be a competitor who's not doing things right, who's gaining what is perceived to be a massive financial advantage by getting things wrong.
Yes,
there's going to be some crossover there with the HSE, I feel. Again with reports on the hotline saying this company just isn't doing it correctly, so do it correctly, get things put straight, get things put right, get your risk assessments done, and you'll sleep you'll sleep safer and sounder at night.
Yes, indeed. So what happens then if the firm doesn't protect their workforce from COVID-19, so far as the HSE is concerned?
Well,
are they actually policing it, in inverted commas?
Well, they certainly are. I mean, the HSE is the enforcing authority. They have massive powers.
Mm-hmm.
They have powers far greater than my old firm, the police. The HSE, and they have a range of enforcement options.
Right.
Whether you want me to go through.
Yeah, please do, because I think it's interesting, because I think people might think that they cannot just operate under the radar. And obviously we I'm talking as the developer of a piece of health and safety software that's designed to help, but obviously I think lots of people would think, well, I haven't seen a HSE officer for a flipping long time. I want to get it right, but really, is there anybody actually policing it? And beyond that, what's going to happen to me if I do get caught doing something not quite right?
That's a good question you asked. What you don't want to do as a contractor is wait until there's a knock on the door to find out, do you?
Yes.
I mean, the very minimal kind of enforcement and the softest options would be, or the lowest kind of enforcement would be maybe a verbal warning.
Yeah.
And then maybe one up from that would be a written warning. Now, once you go into writing with the HSE, you kind of qualify, if that's the right word, or fall foul of what is deemed to be the fee for intervention.
Yeah.
So the HSE will charge you. I think it's about £157 an hour as an admin cost for writing you letters about your perceived breach of the law. Now, I don't know how long it takes you to write a letter, but at £157 an hour, I don't think anybody's going to be racing to get the letter done.
No, I'm sure a few £100 later, there's letters saying.
Yes, so that could be expensive. And then you go into the realms of things like an improvement notice, where you get a certain amount of time given by the HSE to put things right. And that can be very inconvenient if you're trying to get a job done. Move that on now to a prohibition notice, where the HSE say, you haven't got this right, stop the job. And you can start again when you do it correctly. And then the ultimate enforcement sanction would be a prosecution. And we have big fines here. We have unlimited fines under the Health and Safety at Work Act of '74, and we have up to 12 months imprisonment. So we're talking quite serious repercussions if companies don't get this right, and it is enshrined in the Health and Safety at Work Act.
So is this comparable to something like, I don't know, the seriousness of like working at heights?
Yes, very much so. The risks are very, very high. The potential harm, the outcome, is very, very high risk. On your risk assessment, you do a little equation. You multiply the likelihood of the event occurring. You multiply that against the severity of the outcome. And, in this case, you'd have to say the severity of the outcome, could be a fatality. We've all seen the stats. So we're not talking about, giving your thumb a whack.
Well, I guess one of the things I read recently was that construction was actually one of the higher risk categories for the COVID-19 kind of fatalities, and unfortunately, and I guess that perhaps reflects some of the other stats that have been floating around about the kind of the kind of the workforce, i.e. it's male, perhaps of a certain age, etc., and obviously working closely, together, often, or sharing cabs of plant and vans and so on. There's obviously
not a good idea, is it? No. Sharing transport is not good. And when you look at the guidance, it says, don't use public transport. Get yourself to your workplace if you can't do the work from home, and travel singly in vehicles. Now, to do that effectively, a contractor is probably going to have to double his car parking space, isn't he? Because you have twice, 3 times as many vehicles turning up. So things like that, avoid congestion at the site entry point and the site exit point. do things to maintain the 2 meter distances, and it can be done. Carry out your inductions. There's talk about carrying them out outside, so you can space out more. So there are a lot of things that contractors can do to comply with this relatively new guidance.
So, I mean, we'll touch on, if we've got time, we can touch on some of those things specifically. I've got a few things here to ask you about, working remotely and distancing and so on. And one of the pressing questions that I think a lot of builders would have, and I know it's worrying them, is about working in other people's property. Obviously, if you're doing a new build or you've got an empty property that you're renovating, it's perhaps a little bit easier to comply. But obviously, going into somebody's home, i.e. they're doing a home extension, something like that, can they go back to working on those kind of projects? And if you've got any kind of ideas on what they could be doing there?
Again, the short answer is yes, but it does need careful thought. You can't just turn up at the address on Monday morning and say, I've come to do your extension. So, you need to call ahead.
Right.
You need to avoid any personal contact with people in the house. You need to find out if there's anyone in that part of that house who is self-isolating for whatever reason, or is in the vulnerable, clinically vulnerable category. You need to know about the layout of the project in advance. Can your operation as a contractor be done in as much isolation as you can get from the household? Can the household, as it exists within their domestic side of the property, can they be retained within that and let you carry on your work outside? Take your own food in with you. Prepare it. Take your own drinks in. Use your own contractors' toilets and washing facilities. Have as little to do with the people in the building that you're working on as possible. So all these things are mentioned in the guidance, and really there's quite a lot to think about. I just rattled off probably 8 or 9 things there that we need to do, but you can't just rock up there on a Monday morning and say with 3 ground workers and whatever. So and then as the project develops, Jo, you may have to reduce the amount of labor that you put into it on any one day.
You're talking about the multiple trades that may normally kind of coexist.
Yes. My grandson is a painter, and I bumped into him yesterday. We kept a good distance from each other over the garden gate, as you do. And I said, "Are you back? Are you back at work yet?" And he said, "No." He said the prediction was it would be very soon, but because I'm working on site, I have to wait for a trade to leave before I can go to get the spacing. So he's still furloughed, and but contractors are going to have to think about that. The scaffolding is a good example, isn't it? Where you might have had last year 3 trades working on a scaffolding. I don't know, a roofer, a window fitter, maybe somebody doing some bricklaying. It's going to be out now because scaffolding, you need to have this distancing. So they're going to have to work on a kind of a shift basis.
I guess that's why the government introduced the working till 9 o'clock, then 9 p.m. So that you can achieve that during the summer months when you've got some light, half decent weather, fingers crossed. So you've got to maximize that. So I guess that is going to have an impact on cost of the project. It's just bound to, isn't it? Because
even from my bag isn't economics, but even I can see that's going to make things longer. People are going to have to hire scaffolding for longer. That's going to be more expensive. They're going to have to hire welfare facilities if the job expands it over the time threshold. That's going to be more expensive. So yes, there's going to be some adjustment in the cost.
Okay. And in terms of welfare, we're talking about even on reasonably small jobs, the portaloo, the hand washing facilities, on top of because normally I think they probably nip into the downstairs loo or whatever of the homeowner's property, but really we've got to discourage that going into any areas of the property.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Within this epidemic, in this pandemic, it's absolutely crucial to get the highest standard of washing facility that you can get. Now, back in the day, it might have been, before this outbreak, it might have been acceptable to have shared welfare with the client. There was nothing wrong with that, in essence, but there certainly would be now. So, that needs to be completely distinct and separate and of a very high standard. There needs to be hot water. There needs to be good washing facilities, soap, sanitizers, and you can't minimize that in the hope of saving money. You have to go for that big time, because that is mentioned specifically in the guidance in working at other people's homes. So invest some money in that.
Yeah. So I guess what the builder is going to have to do, and I know, money's, talking about money is difficult at the best of times with clients, but I think a very kind of practical upfront conversation needs to be had with the client about their expectation on delivery, on schedule and budget. Because obviously the builder quoting for his project, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, obviously wasn't planning on a worldwide pandemic, which is necessarily going to have cost implications, and that obviously needs to be discussed with the client and paid for by the client. I mean, the builder isn't the bank of the client, but obviously a pragmatic conversation is needed.
Yes, like the risk assessment, it needs that the cost needs to be reviewed in the light of the current situation. Yeah.
Okay. And importantly, I noticed you say teas and coffees, they've got to take their own. Again, they can't have the homeowner.
It's the thing, isn't it? I have work done at my place. I have over the years, and the first thing that I say, to whatever they're doing is,
"Can I grab you a coffee?
Can I get you something?"
Yeah.
So differently now, don't we?
So really, we're talking. Everybody needs, as you said before, everyone needs to take their own food, drinks, flasks, whatever, from home. Yes. Okay.
But the work can be done. This is the essence, isn't it? You can, if you make the right inquiries and you ask the right questions and you do the right things, you can make a start on the contract.
Okay. Super quick one, putting you on the spot. I had a conversation with a builder the other day who was, he's got a health and safety expert, and he was quite happy that he'd got things generally kind of sound. His question when he was talking to me was around an extension he was doing, and he was happy in the garden with the contractors distancing, getting everything right, but at one point they're going to have to knock through into the main house, and they were happy until that point. And then the knock through into the existing property, they're kind of like, when and how do we time, how do we time this? So have you got any thoughts on how they
I wish I was a builder, and I wish I knew what there might be available, but it's to do with isolation, isn't it? And I'm thinking, we're looking at people do all sorts of things with mini enclosures and that kind of thing. So I would be thinking there in terms of some fairly easy to knock up together stud and polythene compartment. So you put a temporary, a bit like the old asbestos compartments used to be. So run something up together using all the builder's ingenuity, involving some kind of.
So you're looking at a divide, a separator, the other side.
Some studding, and make that yet another barrier between where you're knocking through. If you can do that. Look, I'm not a builder. My DIY is really poor, but that's the kind of thing.
Yeah.
Theoretically, that I'd be.
So we're talking about that. The homeowner has to be separated in the rest of the house. If we need an additional divide to do something like you're suggesting, but getting the doors shut that side, making sure that there's no thoroughfare there where people are coming and going.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Okay.
Or have some kind of a no man's land between a door that the household doesn't come through, your operation. So you've got this kind of area in between where there is safety.
Yes. Okay.
These are
Good thinking. I'm sure that's going to be, you know, reassuring for for the customers. So I guess a quick plug then on Health and Safety Expert, and I wanted to touch on in a minute some of the myths, the health and safety myths. There's perhaps 3 or 4 that I wanted to kind of pick your brains on in a minute.
Okay.
But just before we move on, so in terms of Health and Safety Expert, the COVID secure kind of edition that we've got here. So for people listening, it's got the COVID-19 site risk assessment in it. So all the different risks involved with working on site to do with COVID-19. There is a COVID-19 office-based risk assessment. So if you've got the building firm, it's got an office as well, there's a risk assessment purely for the office. On top of which, we've got the COVID-19 toolbox talk for people working on site and wanting to brief up new starts or new trades as they come on site. And I guess that's then linked into the updates that we've made to the site induction. So when you're talking to new starts on site about how the site is being run, and you're getting them run through the site rules. We've got updates to those documents with specific measures and strategies for COVID-19 mitigation. So that's it. That's a useful one. So I'm just looking at a list here as well on my screen. So we've got the pre-construction information is updated, so that we're thinking about COVID-19 and I guess a big impact on thinking about scheduling and who's where and when, and how we keep that phasing safe.
Yes.
Which obviously then leads into the construction phase plan, and it takes that forward. So there's been lots of updates to the big construction phase plan within the software to get that right.
The two big ones, the two biggest in amongst them. Well, they're all important, but the two biggest there would be the COVID-19 risk assessment document, which is I mean, it is very, very, very lengthy and comprehensive, because there is such a lot.
Yes.
Yes. And the other one, so that would be in respect of the site, but there's also a similar one in respect of the office environment. So they would be the two biggest. The toolbox talk, there's a lot in that. So yes, but they are all important. All the ones.
Yes. And I guess overall, this is all packaged up into the company health and safety policy. So, I mean, clearly, as a building company, generally speaking, and all companies, I should add, I think you'll have to correct me on the kind of the legislation here, but all companies have to have health and safety policy.
You're absolutely right. It applies to all employers.
Yes.
And we are one of but many, as I mentioned earlier on.
Yes. So within the company policy, the health and safety policy for the building firm, that's been updated as well to reflect the different responsibilities, because people have to be responsible for these things. You can't just imagine people are going to have common sense and it's all going to happen. I mean, clearly people are a bit conscious about the social distance aspect, but as you were saying before, things like the safe entrance and exit to site, even if that's a home, how are you going to do that? How are you going to make sure that you don't meet the client at the gate? All of these things, that you've got a one-way flow, so you haven't got people toing and froing facing.
One-way flows are good. Yeah, always a great advocate of any one-way system in whatever times, but certainly now that would be good.
You just want to avoid being face on, don't you?
Very much so.
Yeah. And I get one thing that I've seen. I know it's not like it's a legal obligation, but I've seen in a lot of kind of building press is about having like a nominated COVID-19 kind of coordinator. So it's part of someone else, someone's role, so that they're overseeing it more generally to make sure that people are towing the line, and there's a strategy for it within the business.
Yeah, that's a good idea, isn't it? I mean, it's done. It has been done in respect of, and actually enshrined in the law in respect of fire. There's someone on the site who must be deemed to be the person in charge of fire arrangements.
Right.
And on some sites there are people put in charge of emergency evacuations. I've seen people made responsible in environmentally sensitive of projects, made responsible for environmental issues.
Yeah.
So what a good idea to put, and waste, to have a waste supremo on a site.
Yeah.
So why not have somebody whose role it is to be the supremo in respect of this virus?
Yes, and I guess then that means just keeping an eye on things generally, making sure that the plans that you've put in place in terms of the risk assessment are being taken account of and taken seriously. And if they're not, pulling them up on that, because someone else might do on social media, like we were just saying before.
There's always someone, isn't there, wanting to make that call?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
It's just a finger away from a button.
I know. There's always so. We seem to live in those kind of times as well, don't we?
Yeah.
So a couple of myths then I wanted to to touch on. So I'm going to talk about first. Ask you the question about face masks and what the current thinking is on that. Do I have to supply them on site? What's the
good question, that, isn't it? Well, the first thing to say is there are two types of face mask.
Right.
And can we talk about the one which has the European standard, which is the FP1, 2, and 3, which we've been using for years, mainly to stop things like dusts and fibers from entering our airways and our lungs. And it's always been the case, and it still is the case, that if we're talking about that FP1, 2, or 3, that has always been the responsibility of the employer to supply that to employees, in the same way that it's always the employer's task to fund anything done in the interest of health and safety of the employee. However, and this tends to be a slightly movable feast, isn't the right word, but it tends to move and the emphasis tends to change. I'm not saying weekly, but the most recent thinking on what I would call the surgical face mask is that it may have a marginally beneficial effect to prevent the wearer from spluttering germs, droplets, if he coughs. But as a piece of protective equipment for the wearer against disease, the thinking is it doesn't actually do a great deal, if anything.
Right.
So what
that's more the face cover. So is that the face covering?
That's the face cover, yes. And people are even. Science now says even if you put a handkerchief, it would be better than nothing. So we have to distinguish between these two types of face masks. But what I would say, Joe, is if an employee deems it prudent to wear the second variety that I'm talking, the second type, then I think the employer should support that and say, yes, I don't have a problem with not being able to see your face. If you want to wear that one of those surgical types, then I'll support your wish to do that. Okay. But as far as I'm aware, there's nothing at the moment that puts any onus on the employer to provide the second type. Free of charge. So the fact that the employee's wearing it.
Right. Okay. So what we're saying is really you need to be thinking about those other measures, that distancing, that and we'll talk in a minute about things like working side by side and back to back. Just those kind of measures are far more effective than just simply whacking everyone a face mask and expecting everyone to get on.
Retaining the 2 meter distance is deemed to have far greater an effect than wearing the surgical mask.
So I guess then that leads me neatly into kind of operatives working closely. Now clearly there is, without sounding too cheesy, there's a bit of me to you in construction, working closely, passing tools, passing materials, that kind of thing. So are we saying that they can't work closely together at the moment?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, how this virus throws up interesting stories. And I think they were a plumbing couple
Right.
And,
Husband and wife team, I think you'll be saying.
A couple who were both plumbers, and they were I think they could have been married, but if not, they were certainly partnered up in the home. And it was fine because they were coming out of the home environment, working together, like you said, from me to you, hold this, hold that, fine. So the only issue with them was with other people who weren't within their household. But how often is that going to happen? That's going to be very rare. So what can you do? Well, what can you do? You can try to get people to encourage people to work in the same team of 2,
right,
or the same team of 3. So they're not meeting up with fresh members of a team. So trying to keep teams together is a good thing. If you can't do that, and you can't maintain the 2 meters, why not encourage back-to-back working? I know what you're going to say. Well, you can't always do that, but if you can encourage back-to-back working or sideways on working, or I've seen people manufacturing little perspex personal shields, body shields, where they're working on one side of this, and it's kind of like 3-sided. And I even saw one with some wheels on it that a person was pushing. Although they weren't 2-meter distancing, they'd found some way of minimizing.
There was a barrier, a see-through barrier, effectively enable that.
There's certainly 3 or 4 ways there to try and minimize the risk. If you can't eliminate it.
Because I think again, having I talk to builders and trades almost daily in my working life. I should say I'm operations director at HBXL, so I have to take health and safety for the overall company very seriously, but also talking to clients. And one of the clients I was speaking to was, well, I've got some younger guys on site, so they need supervision. I can't let them go off on their own. I've not really wanted to bring them back on site because then we're going to be, I don't know, in someone's bathroom or something. I'm nervous about having them back because we can't we can't keep our eye on them all the time. So I guess one thing is the software has a COVID-19 young persons oriented set of kind of measures, because you need to take it a bit, obviously you've got to take it seriously with everybody, but with a younger person you've got to really make sure that they understand the seriousness of it. I think they think they're invincible, maybe. So
that's the thing. And also even the old the existing risk assessment for the young person on site was put in place because there might be some kind of naivety through lack of experience. Not only lack of experience of the building trade, but lack of experience of life. So it's a good thing that document is in your software, and it's a risk assessment, a COVID risk assessment for a young person.
Yes.
And it goes the extra mile, if you like, in just making things a little bit extra safe, and making that person, because of their naivety and lack of experience, a little bit more clued up.
Yes. So you've got to specifically spend time with them.
Yes.
Going through this additionally. So.
Absolutely.
So I guess what you were saying then about close working and bringing back, kind of a junior, a young and back on site to help. I guess what we're saying is we want them to be working outside as far as possible with the supervision of the older person, as normal, and with that close working, making sure that they're paired up all the time, so that that young person isn't with lots of different.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Is to have that commonality of working partners.
Yeah. Okay. And making sure that outside of work on site, they're behaving themselves and socially distancing when they're not on site.
Yeah.
Okay. So a biggie. I mean, I don't want to be flippant about this, but what is the worst that is going to happen then for a building firm if they don't take this seriously and they just crack on as normal? What's the worst that's going to happen?
On a moral and ethical ground, somebody may. I mean, it's possible somebody may die.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I'd have to say that. And so there's nothing that's going to equate with that in terms of seriousness, or become very, very ill even.
Yes.
But then alongside that, what could happen? A company could suffer any of those enforcement measures from the HSE. So, you could be fined, you could go to prison, and you tend to lose credibility within your industry if people know that you've been convicted or you've had some kind of a notice served upon you for breaching any of this guidance stuff.
So a quick one, Dave. If you've had someone come on site, give you a verbal notice, do you think it's very likely that they'll come back round and say, hello, are you still doing things properly?
Well, I would if I was the inspector, because otherwise, how do you know? If you issue a caution, we call that a caution, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
A verbal caution, verbal advice. If you didn't follow that up, then that would be a fool's paradise, wouldn't it? You'd have no idea. So
the kind of card's a little bit marked. If you end up being either reported or it comes to their attention somehow, just driving past your site, because they obviously do quite a lot of driving by. Yeah, I know in Bristol I heard that there was a bit of a drive. They were driving by and just happened to notice a couple of tradesmen were lifting some really heavy stuff that got delivered and they shouldn't have been. It was really, really heavy blocks, I think it was. And then they were right in there. And, the proprietor got, seriously into trouble for that. And obviously then they'll come back and visit again. But anyway, sorry, I digress there.
Well, no, not at all, because I think then you get on some kind of a list. And then you might become a recidivist offender, somebody then who's is known for not doing it right, and then you attract attention.
Yeah.
And that's the world is like that. That's life.
Yeah. So there's obviously the moral and ethical, like I'm sure all these family businesses who are listening and what have you, and just good people, running good firms. I'm sure they want to get it right, but obviously legally you could end up with a prosecution and a conviction at its worst, I guess, if you really don't
you could, yes.
get it right.
And then there are things like, I haven't touched on civil claims. We've all got the ability and capability to sue other people or organizations. Yeah. And then you talk about so you say, well, all right, the insurance company pays. If I get a finding against me in a civil court, the insurance company pays. But who pays the premium? What happens to your premium next time? So, there's good financial reasons for getting it right.
Yeah.
People always tell me about getting it wrong. Oh, it's cheaper to get it wrong. It's quicker to get it wrong. But think about getting it right and say, you could save yourself money by getting it right. You could save yourself a conviction by getting it right. And on a kind of altruistic level, there's a really good moral and ethical reason for getting it right. Do you want to be the person who's making somebody fatherless or husbandless or wifeless or whatever? So, there's lots of good reasons for getting it right.
Yeah. And I guess on a personal level as well, you don't want to be the recipient. You don't want to get ill yourself, So, absolutely. If you're in people's homes or you're with your, the different people on site, you want to make sure that you're selfishly, you're protecting yourself by doing it, it properly. And I guess, sorry.
Oh, I just said we haven't even touched yet on Section 7 of the Health and Safety at Work Act, which says we all have a duty to look after our own health and safety and those around us. Don't injure yourself and don't injure others. And we haven't even looked at that. So there's lots of good reasons for getting it right.
Yeah. Okay. And then tell me a little bit before we have a quick touch on a quick guide to things that they could be thinking about on site. We touched on some of them, but we'll just rumble through those before we sign off. But what's the riddle or the reporting of, I'm gonna have to read this off here, the reporting of injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrence regulations take on this? What do I have to do as a builder regarding riddle?
It's mentioned in the guidance. So it's mentioned as a dangerous occurrence in the first instance. So, and it says if there's an accidental escape of any part of the virus, let's say, and they give the example of a lab technician accidentally breaking a glass vial and the virus escaping, then that is reportable to the HSE under the RIDOR regulations of 2013.
Yeah, yeah.
To take that on as a disease, because obviously RIDOR covers diseases as well as dangerous occurrences. So if a COVID-19 results from what could be reasonably deemed to be and proved to be the type of work that a person is doing. So I think essentially people in maybe care homes, in, as my daughter-in-law does, the nursing industry, nursing profession, that is reportable now as an occupational disease.
Right.
COVID-19.
Okay.
And it's also mentioned that if there's a death within a company that's reasonably attributable to working within that company, then that is reportable under RIDOR as well. So we got reportable as a dangerous occurrence, reportable as a disease, and reportable as a death.
Right. Okay. And that, I guess, then is if you're giving it to somebody else outside of the building company, or is that if you're the worker on your site?
I think this is meant to take account of the workplace.
Right.
Because,
Yeah.
RIDOR is a kind of a workplace, or if you're doing some workplace activity.
Okay. All right. I guess I was just thinking there, the connection between, where there's the blame, there's a claim type,
Well, that's a good adage, isn't it? Well,
stuff.
no, it's a good adage. And anyone in this in our nation can sue anybody else for a perceived lack of breach of duty of care. So there's probably a lot of cases lurking around the corner.
Yes, indeed.
We haven't got to court yet. I don't know. I just suspect that somewhere along the line there will be a civil case. Somebody will sue some person because of the fact that they were landed with an illness. Because
you just think if you're going into, I don't want to scare people out there listening, but if you're going into someone's home and you have not shown that you have done all that is reasonably practicable to not mitigate the spread of COVID-19, and somebody within the home that you're going into does fall ill, i.e. you're not checking with your team each day, every day, how are you feeling, have you any symptoms, speaking to the client every day, how are you, have you got, are we okay still to work today, and those kind of things, checking in, and then all those policy kind of implementation.
Good point. Yeah, get the risk assessment done, get your certificate to say that you've got the risk assessment done, keep reviewing it, keep working to it, and that demonstrates really that you have done everything that's reasonably practicable. So if someone is considering to make a claim against you, then that is a good base for saying, look, this is what I did. I did this, and I did this to the best of my knowledge and ability, and I think I've done what is reasonably practicable. And it's written down, isn't it, Joe? It's a very good reason to write it down.
Yes. Yeah, because I thought about it last Tuesday.
It passed through my head.
It passed through my head. Yes.
To say, is it? You need to. Things need to be taught. I'm sure there will be COVID-19 lawsuits.
That there's going to be, isn't there?
They're all lurking around, but they can't hold a court at the moment because apparently you need 5 courts to hold 1 court now.
Yes, yeah, I heard about that.
Well, I'm sorry, I digress, but good point you make, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess before we sign off, there's a quick guide for site safety that we've got on the HBXL website that people can go and download. It's not the full risk assessment, but there's really good practical tips there. That includes just looking at here, like working remotely where possible. Clearly, lots of stuff can't be done remotely when you're in construction, but how much preparation can be done, off-site.
It's a good document, that, actually.
Great.
Some good advice on that.
Keeping your distance, obviously, and in all sorts of ways. Checking about illness. Is anybody ill? Client side and your contracting team and your subcontractors. Clearly, you've got to have a conversation with your subcontractors.
Essential, yes, essential.
Traveling separately, we've talked about that. A huge amount of emphasis on personal hygiene and following this guidance, and the duty to get that right.
Yep.
Linked to that, I guess, is about keeping the site clean and taking the waste away from site, making sure that you're not leaving homeowners with, bags of hand towels and all God knows what, and old PPE.
Well, take it with you.
Take it with you. Clear it regularly.
You're doing that anyway. I mean, in the best of times. So
yes.
It's more important to do it now.
Yeah. And also some advice on homeowners, visitors, and the public. So there's a really good checklist there. So irrespective of the software, anyone watching, you can go and download this. It's only a 3-pager checklist, tick boxes. You can run through this. But much better is obviously looking at the health and safety expert software and the risk assessment side of things that we've been talking about. So I'll sign off and give you some information on that in a min, but loads to take away from today, Dave. Biggest thing is do the risk assessment. However so you do it, with our software or without, get the risk assessment sorted. It's there for your protection, your client's protection, your staff's protection. And obviously we don't want a wave 2 of COVID-19. So it pays for us all to get it right. But obviously health and safety expert can do the legwork for you. It can do a serious amount of graft, which you then review and you implement. So it's not a magic bullet. It's done a lot of the hard work for you, but obviously you've got to then take it forwards in your business and make it happen. And something I heard loud and clear from you today, Dave, was about cowboy builders. If they won't be doing this, I'm sure. They're not going to be giving this too much thought. And obviously anyone listening today is absolutely not in that camp because they're bothered about it, which is why they're listening. So I think set yourself apart as a COVID secure business who takes this seriously. Make sure that you don't get noticed by the nosy neighbours, acting incorrectly in terms of your COVID mitigation. And then promote the hell out of the fact you've done it. I mean, I know normally with health and safety, it's a bit dirty word, dirty expression. Everyone bloody hates health and safety. But use this really to your advantage. Make sure you nail it, that you've done it properly. Get your notice, your government notice on your website, on your
put it on the website. Absolutely, yes.
On your sites, have it at the entrance to your site. Show it through.
Board, yes.
Yeah.
Advertise the fact that you've done it. Yeah.
Yeah, and reassure the people around the site. If you've got, if you're doing, I don't know, an extension in a suburban area, and you've got homes on each side, stick the notices up outside that is what you're doing, and try and reassure people around you. And obviously that will reassure the HSE too, and the contractors that will work with you. They might be thinking, I don't know if I mean, obviously everybody needs to go back to earn a crust kind of thing, but people are still nervous about doing so. So having shown that you're doing it properly will reassure the people that you work with as well. And I think it will become ingrained. We were talking about this earlier. I think that people will expect this as we go forwards, and we know that it's going to be around for another year or two, don't we? Anyway, so get it sorted.
Whatever happens, it's not going to happen quickly.
Yes, yeah, and I'm sure homeowners are still going to be as desperate as ever for a good builder. So have this in your back pocket, and you can reassure everybody that you are that good builder. So if you're interested in Health and Safety Expert, you can have a trial of the software absolutely free for 14 days. So you head to the HBXL website, so that's hbxl.co.uk, or just Google HBXL or other search engine, and will come up. And you can take a trial, or you can have an online demo of the software, and we'll put the details up in just a mo of how you can book a demo with one of our team who can show you through the software with a specific emphasis on the COVID-19 side, and help you apply it to your business. So those contact details will be up in just a mo. So Dave, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've touched on loads today, so hopefully it's been useful for people watching today. So I'll sign off, Dave. Thank you very much as ever for your time and the effort that goes into the documents in the software, and we'll see you soon.
My pleasure, as I said. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, Dave.
Hello.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.